Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of Petri.com's Unplug IT. I'm your host, Stephen Rose. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have seen a lot of cool things in the 14 years that I spent at Microsoft. I saw a ton of cool software and hardware, things like Groove Music and Sway. For those who remember Sway, the Zune, MMS Conference, Surface RT, Kaizala, so much more. But you know, what's interesting is that Microsoft has had just as many misses as they have had hits, as have most companies. But with that said, I've been using Loop for the past 6 months, and I can say it is absolutely in the win column for Microsoft. It is a great tool to help you and your coworkers collaborate and work synchronously at a whole new level. So I thought, you know, I could talk about this myself, and I'm super excited, but I thought I should invite a guest. And I thought, you know, who is one of my favorite guests that I've had on various shows with me over the years, and my good friend, Darrell Webster, I thought would be a perfect person to join me for this one. He is all the way in the Southern Hemisphere. It is early morning Saturday for him. He has just finished his pancakes, but I appreciate you taking time out, Darrell. How are you, my friend?
Oh, great. It's good to be here on the show. And look, it's awesome to see this new series that you're pulling together, and Unplug IT. What a cool name.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So tell us a little bit about yourself, because you're now doing new stuff and some new things for you.
Yeah.
So take a moment, kind of talk about some of the things you are doing and where people can find you to learn more and check out all the cool new stuff that you have going on.
Sure thing. Look, I'm a change consultant, change management. I've always found an interest in turning the lights on from a people perspective, right? I've had experience on the IT pro perspective, and you know, that's great. I can still be dangerous and ask the right questions, but I enjoy helping people and businesses to make the most of IT and align it with how they work. So I've recently branched out to independent consulting. My first client is my previous employer, so I've got secured work, and I'm looking forward to helping and partnering with other tech businesses and clients. I'm known as Darrell as a service in various different places on Twitter. You'll find me on LinkedIn and other places too. And I just get active in the community. I make the most of the tools, Stephen, to reach out and connect with people across the planet. So I'm not shy of getting up early.
Well, I think you're doing a pretty good job. You're an MVP. You've reached out to a ton of folks. You've been engaged in everything from Ignite to your own podcast to being on other people's podcasts. You've made a great name for yourself in the industry. And I'm excited to have you back doing some work with me once again, as you've been a guest on my previous show, and you even did some demo stuff at Ignite, and were even part of my Ignite wrap-up show a few years ago. So always great to hang out. But we're going to talk about Loop today, and you've got a cool shirt on and everything. So what do you think about Loop? Before we dig into what it is and how it works on that, what are your thoughts on the product?
I understand the vision. I get it. It's to me, it's like the product that we wanted many years ago, to try and just work from wherever we are, and it doesn't matter what tool we're in. We can use Loop where we are, or we can use Loop as a workspace to pull people together. And I know we're going to get into that later. What I like about it, Stephen, is it's a simple, frictionless way to start an idea, build it out, and collect knowledge. There's all sorts of scenarios. So yeah, I'm just excited to see where it's going.
Cool. Well, let's set the Wayback Machine for 2019, when Microsoft first announced Fluid Framework, that this was going to be this new free open source computer platform for real-time collaboration, and it can do all this cool stuff. And then we saw nothing about it after that. I remember Jeff Teeper talking about it. Hey, Fluid Framework is the future. And there was nothing for quite a while. And then this popped up, and I'm like, this is Fluid Framework. This is exactly what we were talking about. And the goal was that you would be able to take files and link data from other apps and chat and have them show up in real time in other places. And I thought, yes, now I get it, that this is always up to date, that it's real time, and that it drops in, and Loop kind of now finally brings that to life. And I was very excited. I remember seeing Jeff, and I'm like, I get it now, Fluid Framework, Loop. And he's like, Yeah. And I'm like, it's awesome. It's great to see this finally come, because I remember chatting with so many people on what is this fluid framework thing? And people are like, I don't know, but it sounds cool. So Loop kind of has three different ways that it works. There are Loop components and Loop pages and Loop workspaces. So let's start with a Loop component. So I'm going to turn it over to you to demo. I'll have you do this through Teams, and I'll jump on Teams here on my end. And let's show off what a Loop component looks like, and then I'll show how this works in some other apps. So let's have you kick off our first demo of the day.
Sounds good. All right. Okay, Stephen. So we're in a conversation, and that's where a lot of ideas get started, because we inspire each other and we talk. And so we've got this chat going. And sometimes we're like, okay, where do we capture these ideas and take notes and thoughts? And we might try and start a OneNote or a Word document, but all of those sorts of things take time. So Loop components are actually a good place to start, because they're really easy to add to a conversation. Your conversation has to be blank, right? So it is something we add to a new response. And as we click this Loop messaging extension, the rest of the world doesn't need to know it's called that. It's the Loop button.
It's the Loop icon. It's the little zero-y looking Loop icon. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, we've got a few different choices about how we can get started quickly. Sometimes, look, you don't want to be paralyzed by choice, so I sometimes just start off with a paragraph and then work it out from there. But it's nice to see they've got these nice prompts here about what we're about to see. So let's go paragraph. Now that's creating the Loop file in the background, and we want to give it a title. So this is Ideas with Stephen. And then I'm not going to wait any longer. I'm going to send this off, because you can't see this, Stephen, can you?
No, I don't see anything until you hit send. The same way if you were sharing a file with me, I'm not going to see it till you hit send.
Exactly. Before I hit send, though, I do want to point out something that could be helpful. When your organization wants to set sharing defaults, for example, my default sharing here is that anyone who has the link to this loop can edit the loop. And so if you wanted to change that, you can click on the button and you'll see a very familiar box if you've ever shared a document in SharePoint or OneDrive before.
Yep.
And I'll just leave it at that, because I'm wanting to keep it open, Stephen, in case we need to loop in some other people. So we'll leave it at that.
Loop in some other people? I get it. That was funny.
Yeah, well, isn't it finally that there's a product that actually really kind of, it's an action, but it actually kind of works? It's good. Product name. So here we are. We've got a paragraph. And Stephen, you're already in there. So what we could be pulling together some show notes and trying to think about how we're going to present this. That's a great place to start.
Yeah. So what I did was I hit, and one of my favorite tools, and actually I'll go back out of that, is the / that as soon as you hit it, you get all of these really cool choices, even beyond what you saw, like a progress tracker and all of that. So I hit that / and I'm going to choose a voting table so that we can pick a few things that we'd like. So we'll say, one good idea for a show could be Loop, and you can see me typing in as I do it. Pros, Loop is cool. And that's great. Are there any cons around Loop? Sure, yes. Only works with people in your own tenant.
Yeah.
All right, so there's my first one. Now, what's great is you're seeing me type this exactly as I'm typing it, and you're going, okay, so, why is this so great and why is this so good? Because we're going to keep doing this, but what I'm going to have Darrell do here in a minute is there's a little button up at the top that says copy link, and he could, I'm in his own tenant right now for in Teams, but not an email. But if I was, the same way that he could share a document with me internally, whatever, he could hit that copy button and he could go into Outlook and drop this exact piece in real time. And everything we're seeing here would be there inside of Outlook. And if I were to receive that email, I could click and edit, make changes, and it would show up right here inside the Teams chat. This could be inside of a variety of areas. We'll see this integrated more into Word and PowerPoint and other apps as we move on. How else have you seen people sort of using this within the Teams thing? The best way I've seen it done is for agendas for team meetings. And it's a great way to sort of talk about that and share that with everybody and have that in there.
Well, yeah, Stephen, that's a good flow to show very quickly that this could have been an agenda, and we'll just maybe forward slash and use a let's just add a heading. So this is agenda. Double click that to be able to give it a bit of style.
A bit of flair,
Um,
sure.
yeah, that's right, and we can add our agenda item 1 and item 2, etc. So, Stephen, the good thing about this is that we have come up with some ideas in chat, and I can copy that component, and we'll jump into an email invite and say content planning for show.
And there's that little
And
loop
invite.
button right down there at the bottom, which is great. I can see
Yeah,
it.
that's right.
Yeah,
So if
there it
I was
is.
adding something from scratch, maybe I wanted to add that agenda from scratch, I could add that there. But I'm going to copy and paste that component that we had there in chat. And so we've already done the work, and I would send that off.
Right.
And
Now, actually, before you click send, I was going to say scroll down. Or actually, reopen that
Yep.
up.
Sure.
And here's what's cool. Once you reopen this, and if you scroll down, all the way, keep going. I'm going to go to where this at. Now, I'm still in Teams, and I could say item 4, and look at that. I'm in Teams. I just typed in item 4, and you see this. So whenever you open up this email that you've gotten and you look at this invite, you are always going to see the most up-to-date information because it is this loop fluid element that we've dropped in that I have in Teams, and now he's copied it and linked it into an Outlook meeting, and these are always in sync.
Where we found this really practical too, Stephen, is it's not just the agenda, but we're adding notes to this. We're putting things into a parking lot and into a table, and so it's always attached to maybe a recurring meeting, and so it's easy to find, and people can just jump into it when they're in the meeting or outside of the meeting. It's always easy to see it attached to the meeting artifact.
I love it. I think that that's awesome. So what I'm going to do now is let's have you open up a loop page and let's take a look at what we just typed and what's in there, and we can see it. So if you want to go ahead and just open up your loop page, or I can do it.
Okay, so there's a few ways to do that actually,
Yeah.
Stephen, and this is cool. Often when there's a loop component within Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc., or rather I should say Word, Outlook, and Teams, you click on the title of the loop, and this will open up the loop page on its own. So it's going into Office.
And the loop page is part of a workspace, and we'll talk about workspaces in a minute, but here is the loop page that we were just working on, which is great. And again, I'm still here in Teams, so I can go down and I can add another item 5. Again, I'm still in Teams. I just hit item 5, and we're seeing that showing up on my page. So what is the difference now between a loop element and a loop page? And then we'll talk about a loop workbook.
Well, the loop that starts in a Teams chat or an Outlook conversation is saved as a file into your OneDrive. And that feels like the right place to put it at the moment because sometimes you need to share it quickly with people and you don't have to worry about finding that space.
Right.
But loop components, you do want to bring those things into the loop app and the loop workspace where we're collecting our ideas, we're collecting our information and making it available to a whole team that we might invite into a workspace. So we'll find when we open up the loop app that we can find this same loop component in the recent loop activity, and then we can attach it to our loop workspace.
All right, let me show what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and take over presenting, and I'm going to demo that. Okay, so here I am inside of loop.microsoft.com. We can see that up here at the top, and I'm there, which is great. So we can see that as I take a look. And then I have some different projects I've started here. So I can go to Petri Unplugged. And hey, here's an episode outline that Darrell and I worked on for this episode, where we went through and typed in different questions and things we want to talk about. But I want to get to the loop that we were just working on. So I can go to Recent. And just like I would see inside of OneDrive, here's a list of all the most recent things. Here's that Ideas with Stephen, content planning for show. And I can see here, I can open that up in Outlook or in Teams. It's in two different places. I'm going to open it up, though, as the loop page. And here it is. Now, I have some shared locations. I can copy that component. I can choose just share just the link component or the whole page. I can also see, and this is great, version history, all the different times when we made edits or changes to it. So I can see that there, and I can restore one of those versions. This is the one place where you can do that. And I know that's a question that a lot of folks have. And I can go down here. We already had, items 1 through 5. I can say, you know what? I would instead just like to add an emoji. So I'm going to add the microphone emoji here, along with 2 sunglasses. And that will be my line number 6. Darrell is seeing the same thing on his. I can also go to ideas. And this is great, where I can say, hey, what do you want to start? Do you want to start a project brief or a team decision or project planning or meeting notes? Any one of these. So I can say, hey, you know what? I want to do a project brief. It'll automatically give me a template. I can update the cover. I can update the icons. I can go in here and see the sort of things. Also notice where the assign to is. These are all @s. And I can, with that, that'll go out to an email saying, hey, you've been mentioned in a loop chat, and allow me to see exactly what that was, to be able to go to it. I can drop in relevant links as I see those here at the bottom. So, or meeting notes or project plans or any one of these. So this is a loop workspace, kind of like a OneNote, but we'll talk about in a minute kind of the key differences between OneNote and loop workspaces. Anything else you want to add about loop workspaces that I might have missed, Darrell?
Oh, well, Stephen, there is one more thing that I think a lot of people are asking about their loop content in OneDrives, and that is, how do we attach it to a loop workspace so we bring it all together?
Sure. Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and show us?
All right. So we are in that loop workspace again, and I want to show you this really cool thing up here, recent. Now, recent is not just content that you're recently working on in your loop workspaces in the loop app, but it also shows content that you might have created as a loop component. So here's the ideas with Stephen. We can see that we have created it in a Teams chat. We've also shared it in a meeting invite, so it appears there in Outlook. But if I open up the space, then I've got a place where I can see those same shared locations, and I can add it to a workspace. So let's do that. Choosing that, I can see all the different workspaces I can add it to. Let's add it to the Petri Unplugged IT. And we can click through to see where that is. And there it is. It's a page within the list. Yeah. So,
and if you scroll down, you should also still be able to see, as you can see, there it is. Those little icons, everything else you've thrown in, it's all up to date. So we're basically taking this live element and we're moving it back and forth and all over. Awesome. Love it. All right. Great stuff. So now let's ask the tough questions, which I know everybody's asking, which is, okay, is this going to replace OneNote, or when do I use OneNote? When do I use Word, and when do I use Loop? And the one thing I always say for Word is great when I have something that is evergreen, meaning this is a document or something that I'm working on. It's a proposal with a bunch of people. You want all the collaboration tools, because this is not going to tell you who changed things and take you right to it and give you the reviewing tools that you have in Word, which is meant for a bunch of people collaborating together on a document or a white paper or something that is going to go out and represent. These are elements that you're dropping into something which are timely, but not something that you're going to probably need to refer back to 10 years from now. So that's sort of Loop versus Word, and why you would want to write a proposal or a group thing in Word and not in Loop. Now, you can still see real time as people are working in it, but as the author, you have a lot more control and can remove all those comments and edit and manage. But what about Loop versus OneNote? What are your thoughts there, Darrell?
it has been quite a common comparison. And even as we talk about Loop workspaces, we talk about that OneNote construct of pages and sections.
Right.
I think Loop is helping in the note-taking space for sure, in that we can easily start and share content using the Loop components, and then on-share things from that. And then we've got components that allow us to do a whole lot more inside of Loop. But OneNote still feels a great space in terms of using digital ink, and that also it is already part of a Microsoft team or a SharePoint team site.
Right.
If you are a die-hard OneNoter too, then you might be also using some of the add-ins to expand on some of your capabilities. So we don't see that in Loop yet, but I definitely see
No.
some
Yeah.
crossover. Yeah.
Yeah, but the other nice thing about OneNote is I can share it with anybody. Anybody. I could take a page. You don't have to be part of my domain. I can say, here it is. We're going to work on this together, or send it just as a read only and have them add it in. So it's a great way to create sort of an evergreen to do, or an evergreen, here's a step-by-step list on how to do this, where it's more, I want to share this out and have other people add, but it does not need to be in real time. The other thing is, with that, you're not relying on, the OneNote change engine and all those permissions and things that you might run into, which could make sharing a loop out document or a loop element a little bit different. Now, you can use Loop in Outlook and Teams. You can use it now in Word for Web and in Whiteboard. What do you think about it coming to more places? Do we see this popping up in Excel or PowerPoint or things along that line? Where else would this functionality make sense as we move forward?
I think it actually does make sense, and I've had this conversation with people. Like, we've got Word as a full, rich tool in terms of developing documents. Why would I start a loop component in Word? But I would say that, like we've seen this experience today, our ideas might start in a conversation. They might be planned out in a Loop workspace in terms of coordinating work and assigning tasks and coming up with briefs and outlines and references and all sorts of links like that. We can then take that Loop component and embed it on the front page of the document while we're working on it. So imagine it,
Right.
Stephen, being a place where we can use that to coordinate our work on the document and then also bring it back into our meetings. Whiteboard certainly comes into, I guess it fills that gap where Loop doesn't have inking or notation or spatial kind of sticky notes and the like. So the two go really well together in terms
Agreed.
of the ideation process. I like being able to use a Loop embedded in a page and then have the idea stuff around it. And I'm also excited to see what's coming in terms of Copilot and the summarizing space and how it works with loops as well.
So if you had to pick 2 or 3 things that you are now able to do better because of Loop, what is that takeaway? Because that's the big one for the audience is, okay, when should I look to drop in a Loop element? And what's interesting is most people don't even realize they have Loop. I can't tell you how many times I've been at a conference and I have people in education or government. I'm like, okay, go down to that little icon down there. Now click it. Now click with somebody else. And then they'll come back to me the next day and go, oh my God, that's the greatest thing I've ever seen. This is awesome. It's going to change how I work. And for some people, they look at it and go, that's cool, but how do I use it? So what is your advice to folks on 3 things that they will immediately be able to do better or see benefit from in using an aspect of Loop pages, Loop components, Loop workspaces, and Loop, which will come to mobile. We'll talk about mobile app in a few minutes, but what are your thoughts there?
I think aligning it with some of the common scenarios that we work anyway. I like seeing Loop being used in a chat and then taken into a meeting. Like I said, a lot of these ideas that we come up with are in those conversation spaces where we're talking, we're trying to capture ideas. Someone sees something great and they go, you better note that down.
Right.
And so being
Parking
able to just
lots,
drop
yeah.
that in. Exactly, yeah, just drop that in there and build on it. And what I also like seeing too is Loop being taken into different places. So if we bring it into that workspace, great, we can work on it, we can build out and collect knowledge together on a page and maybe create some more pages related to that, create a page dedicated to one of the tasks to actually action that idea. But being able to also share just a piece of that loop to loop someone in to maybe work on only the paragraph or only the table. I quite like that segmenting of being able to loop people in to contribute.
Cool. All right. Let's talk a little bit about security. This is an IT Pro show. Now, Loop components, as we said, are stored inside of OneDrive. You can go to OneDrive and you can see all the Loop components that you've created there. And you can also click on it there and see all the versioning, which is great. First off, Loop components are available to everyone in your organization who has the link. It's not possible to make them available to only certain people or to certain people outside of your organization. So that's the thing to be aware of, is that there are some limitations in managing loop components. Why is that? What are your thoughts around that, Darrell? I mean, I get, why not allow it like a OneDrive file to be sent out? Is it just that we're not in the maturity of the product yet? Or do you think that there's an underlying control or safety that makes more sense around that?
I think it is about maturity of the product. And while we did have that massive gap between Buzz Video in 2019, it was 2019,
Yes,
and the launch of the Loop app and components, it is still something that they want to get right. And I think it also depends on having that loop capability enabled on your external guest side. So we know that it's set up for success, that eventually when external sharing is supported for loops, whether it be from your OneDrive or eventually from Teams, that this will be possible. But they are taking it cautiously, and as other organizations are also deciding whether or not to turn it on, that's going to be the thing that makes it possible for them to participate in using Loop.
Okay. From a security standpoint, second, loop components do not support sensitivity labels from emails or meetings. So that's the first thing to be aware of. DLP, data loss prevention, does support loop components, but DLP support is coming soon. And I haven't heard anything more on that. I hear at some point this year it will come, which is great. But loop components are discoverable using e-discovery and Purview. So for legal purposes, you can find those. You can save the loop as an HTML archive so it can be viewed. It is live, so they can't be read offline for that. So that's what it can do. It opens them up in a browser without being able to edit the content or damage the evidence if that's what the case is. So those are a few things from a security standpoint to keep in mind. Now, what does it mean if I don't see Loop in Teams? What does that mean? Well, the first one is obviously you may not have OneDrive. So you got to have OneDrive going. Can you use this with Box or Dropbox or any of the other tools, or is it OneDrive specific?
It's OneDrive specific. It is the fluid technology built into the SharePoint infrastructure. Maybe one day third-party products will support Fluid as a framework. Who knows?
Yeah. You obviously have to ask, has your company turned on internal sharing and Loop only works in HTML emails? It does not work in plain emails. And the company can turn off Loop. What else could be some of the things that are not happening? Because I know I got a business license. I turned on Teams and I didn't see Loop. And I'm like, I have OneDrive. I have Loop. What would you say to somebody before I give you the answer on what I realized the issue was? What are some of the other things that you need to make sure of to make sure that Loop pops up in your tenant?
Right. Well, there are some things that you want to do to enable Loop, think of it as two experiences: Loop components and the Loop app. And there are some policies that you need to turn on. There's a couple of PowerShell commands that you need to run to make it available as well. And I think that this is, at the moment, Stephen, Loop components were a default on experience to begin with, and the option was given to organizations to turn it off if they wanted to.
Right.
Whereas the Loop app experience is the opposite, because Microsoft recognized that the compliance side of things are still being built. They didn't want to create a big problem, so they gave a method for organizations to turn it on, share it with a limited group of people using the Office config policies, and allow a few people to use it that way. So there are a few steps. It's well documented. And while some people might complain and say, I just want it turned on, do I have to have my admin involved? It's good to see Microsoft being responsible as they try to get the admin story built out before they make it widely available.
No, I agree. You can go to learn.microsoft.com, and then when you're there, search manage loop components, and it will go
Mm,
through all the settings for management and Outlook and Word and all the rest, and it will go through it. Few other things if loop is there but not working for you. Loop is of maybe in a view mode rather than a reviewing or editing mode, and loop does not work in Safari. So that's something important. It does work in Chrome and it does work in Edge, but it does not work in Safari. It is now working on Teams and Mac, though. That was one that a few months ago was not working as
mm.
you demoed. And like you said, loop components may have been turned off by an organization, so you may have to check with the admin or on why that is. What else have you seen on reasons why loop may not be working for someone?
Or not working as expected. One
Right.
common one I've seen, and it relates to your external sharing policies, choices that you've made. Some organizations set defaults to coach people towards good behavior in terms of making a deliberate choice about how they share their content. And you'll be infinitely aware with this, Stephen, from your
Yep.
OneDrive background. But being able to set the defaults so that it is good practice would be to show or share to specific people. That's your default. You go to share a document, there it is. It guides you
Right.
through that process. But that's not great for Loop, because Loop is about trying to share it with people and loop people in. So one thing that is, I guess, it's not a consistent experience, but what we saw earlier with adding a loop to a Teams chat, we get that option to choose the permissions. Now we do have the
Right.
same option in Outlook, adding a loop to Outlook, but it's not the same user
It's not
interface.
yet. No.
And if you haven't chosen appropriate defaults, like if your default is to share a file from your OneDrive with view-only permissions, then Outlook sometimes sends out a loop attached and people can't do anything with it. You've got to know where to change that permission.
Right. Right. Good points. All good stuff. So, I mean, the takeaway here is we would love for you to try Loop. We would love for you to turn it on. You're going to find in certain groups, this could be a game changing application in how people collaborate, how people work together on these small things, but that are important. From, hey, we're going to do a BYO lunch thing. So, what does everybody want to bring? Fill something in here, and we're all seeing it. And the great thing is, and I've seen folks do this where they put in what stock is and they'll drop it in as a loop component. And that way, when you open up email, every time that email calls home, you're getting the most updated version of that rather than having to go through a large spreadsheet for small amounts of things. So there can be times when having that live component across multiple inside of a web Word, inside of a whiteboard, inside of Outlook, inside of Teams, inside of a team chat can make a world of difference in how you work together and how you collaborate. So I'm a big fan. Give us some final thoughts on Loop and what you would say to IT administrators on using Loop and turning it on within their environment and encouraging people to use it.
I do encourage a gradual or cautious pilot if you do need to take some small steps to begin with. But as a change manager, I like to see pilots including real people and not just the IT people.
Right.
Sorry, IT people, you are real people. What I mean is business
Yes.
people, business users. It's important because you're going to get...
Let's just refer to them as ordinary end users, not special admin users. So we'll do it that way. Yeah.
We're end users too. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yes, exactly.
Include them in your pilots because you're going to get a whole other different perspective that you might have glossed over, and they're going to show you and talk about scenarios where they might want to use it, or things that you might find simple that they might not find so intuitive. And that's going to help to discover even scenarios within your business that people can relate to, and that'll help you with your rollout and maybe even just simple adoption thinking in terms of sharing that around.
I love that. And chances are you already have these icons and didn't even realize it and haven't been using them. So try it out, test it out, see how you like it. Awesome. Darrell, do you have any additional information on Loop that you would like to share with folks from your own, videos and things like that? Where would you tell people to take a look?
If you go to my website, modernworkmentor.com, early on, I thought, look, rather than writing a whole lot of blog posts and creating a bunch of videos on YouTube and just sort of them sitting out there, why not pull that together in a course and make it something that people can follow so that we can learn together? So there is a reference there on my website to learn Microsoft Loop. We've also got a LinkedIn-based user group, so you'll find the Microsoft Loop user group, which you can join, and we have sessions that we're learning together about how to use Loop as it rolls out.
Okay, I want to thank my special guest, Darrell Webster. Darrell, awesome to have you. Thanks so much for joining. So lots of cool stuff coming up. I want to thank everybody for joining me here on Unplug IT. I'm your host, Stephen Rose, and we will see you very, very soon. Say goodbye, Darrell.
See you all. Bye now.
Bye, everybody.